The next dream is the village closest to heaven. In this village, ringed by jagged mountains, the woman gives birth to many children. 5 or 6 is not uncommon. Just the one day, the wife of the village headman gave birth to her 10th child. And why do you think that is? The young fellow asked the traveler, looking down at the snow-blanked village. Kiam cocks his head in search of an answer. Meanwhile, the young man takes something like a piece of crystal candy from a small leather pouch. He pops it into his mouth and says with a laugh, "Because they die right away." "The children?" "Uh-huh. Hardly anybody grows up to be an adult. Most kids die after 5 or 6 short summers." Looking at the village headman's wife, she's lost 7 kids already. Damn. I guess, that's the way it is because they lack the proper medical care. But whatever. Moving on. Whatever from a generic problem to a disease epidemic in the area. The people of the village had always lived short lives, he says from way, way back. Now that you mention it, says Kiam, I haven't seen any old people here. See what I mean? A few decades ago, I'm told, one person lived to be 50, but people say that's the oldest anyone ever has gotten in the whole history of the village. This is why we give birth to lots of kids. Give birth to lots and lose a lot. Or lost a lot, I don't know. If just one of them lives into adulthood through the family line is saved and village history continues. You see the point? You see my point? That was it. Why did I say something else? I don't know. The young man is 16 as is his wife. Their first child is due to be born any day now, literally today or tomorrow. The young man crushes down on the candy in his mouth. "Let's get going," he says, and around his wrist he winds the rope he uses to pull the sled. He hasn't loaded the sled yet, but drags it up the steep snow-covered road is hard work. This, he says, is why the pay is good. Only a few days earlier, he lost his good friend and fellow worker, who had been 3 years his senior. Sorry. When Kiam happened along, that was it. When Kiam happened along, the young man asked him if he would have been pushing the sled from behind until they cleared the pass. Kiam agreed, and they became an instant team. Kiam circles around the back of the sled and asks, "You don't have any animals to pull your sled?" "Afraid not," says the young man. "I know it's strange, but our horses and cattle and donkeys all die young. They can spend a lot of money at the town market buying an animal, and it'll kneel over before it's done a lick of work. Finally, the best way for us humans to plow the fields is to pull sleds ourselves." The arms with which the young man himself is pulling his sled are massive, and he forges through the road's snow corner with powerful steps. His fellow workers are strong still, he says. "He taught me how to pull the sled, now to steep rabbit traps, how to build a fire, all the skills I need to live, with all the love he would give to a kid brother. Before I knew it, he was gone." "People here always die suddenly," he says. "They can be perfectly healthy one minute and drop dead the next. No time for suffering, just like that. No no time to call a doctor. Even if a doctor comes, there is nothing he can do. Did your friend die that way? Uh-huh. He was shoveling the snow that piled up overnight, clearing the road while he dropped dead. When he dropped dead. By the time we ran over to help him, he was gone. That's how it always is. Anyways, that's how they die. Grown-ups, kids, everyone. And you too, then. I guess so. Nobody knows when the moment is coming. It might be decades from now, or it could be tomorrow. After this cool pronouncement, the young man turns to look at Kiam and, pointing to his own chest, says with a smile, or maybe even now. The smile is genuine, without a hint of despair or bitterness towards the cruelty of his fate. Aren't you afraid to die? Kiam starts to ask him, but stops himself. It's a stupid question. He decides, and one he is not qualified to ask. Where could a man burdened with eternal life find appropriate words to speak for a man burdened with the threat of sudden death? Kiam and the young man kept dragging the sled up the steep mountain path. Their destination is the lake beyond the pass. The young man's job calls from him to cut ice from the surface of the frozen lake and transport it back to the village. We in the village call the lake the spring of life. If you trace the source of the water that bubbles out of the ground here and there in the village, you always wind up at the spring of life. Kiam nods silently. The ice from the spring of life takes forever to melt. That's why, look, you can even do this. Again, the young man takes a piece of crystal candy, or rather ice, from his leather pouch and puts it in his mouth. It gives you energy. It's indispensable when doing hard work or for pregnant women or infants. Just put a piece in your mouth and it gives you instant strength. The young man offers a piece to Kiam, who nods again in silence. We're really not supposed to give any to outsiders, but you're special because I'm putting you to work. If I give it to you, though, I want you to I want you to help me load the ice on the sled. I can handle it by myself on the way back. Kiam silently accepts the ice from the young man, who assures him it tastes good too, and watches him smiling. Kiam averts his glaze somewhat to put the piece in his mouth. That's what I meant to say. God, why am I getting words mixed up again? The ice should be nothing but frozen water, but it has a mild sweetness, just as Kiam expected. He spits it out when the young man is not looking. Poison. I know that taste, thinks Kiam. The village people are used to this taste, so they think nothing of it. Without a doubt, there is poison in the ice. The long flow of time smooths over the wounds inflicted by history. The permanent snow-capped peaks make people forget the existence of the wide world on the other side. The young man calls this lake the spring of life, but those who lived far beyond the mountains at the source of the river that feeds the lake used to know it as the pit of death. Long ago, several hundred years ago, the entire area around the river's source was polluted with a poisonous metallic outflow from a mine. The river was filled with dead fish floating belly up, and the poisonous gas that rose like mist from the ground killed both the earthbound animals and the birds in the sky. The forest withered, and the lively town that had grown up with the development of the mine became a deserted ruin. Nature took many years to recover, but the forest eventually turns green again, which attracted small animals and eventually large animals that hunted them. Excuse me. People, however, never came back, and there was no one left to hand down the story of the tragedy that occurred to the river south deep of the mountains. The river's source, deep in the mountains. The only one who knows everything that happened is Kiam, the man who has lived 1,000 years. The young man stands by the frozen lake and takes a nice, satisfying stretch. You know, he says to the traveler, I sometimes think this village just might be the closest one to heaven in the whole world. Perhaps it's just because we are too close to heaven that we are all summoned by the gods early on. Do you think that might be true? Kiam says nothing in response to this. Over many years, the lake has accumulated a metallic poison that flowed on from upstream. And over many years, the poison that infiltrated the soil has mingled with the groundwater, building up into spring water, with which villagers slake their thirst. Yeah, that's it. Why was I thinking it was pronounced something else? I don't know. No one knows the exact climate makeup of the poison, but at least it does not cause the villagers to suffer until at the last moment of their lives. The accumulation poison suddenly takes its toll. This may be one fortunate aspect. On the other hand, this might simply make the misfortune of bringing all of the more conspicuous. Still, the young man says as he saws off a piece of ice by the shore, I do hope the children, my wife, and I will be able to live longer lives. Say, if we have five, one of them will live long enough to grow up and have kids. That way, for me, it would be like finding some meaning in having been born into this world. It was the same with my father and mother and my grandparents. They all had lots of kids and mourned the loss of lots of kids that managed to raise one or two of adulthood before they died. That's what gives our life meaning. He wipes the sweat from his brow and puts another piece of ice candy in his mouth. If I were to tell him everything I know, thinks Kiam, if I were to tell him everything that has been buried in the darkness of history, if you were to tell the other villagers, the tragedy might not have been repeated. The young man says, when the baby is born here, they ring the village bell. Also, when someone dies, the same for both. Birth and death are like two sides of the same coin. So there's no sadness when someone dies. Everybody sees them off with a smile, and you wish you go ahead of us to heaven and save a good spot there for us. Do you understand that statement? I do, says Kiam. I do. That's how we've always done it. Welcoming lots of lives into the village and sending lots of lives off to heaven. I've never been much of a student, so I don't know exactly how to put this, but I kind of think that maybe the village closest to heaven is a place where life and death are right next door to each other. The young man gives Kiam an embarrassed smile at the sound of his own words. Maybe it's because I'm about to have a kid of my own, and I'm starting to think about those complicated things. No, that's fine. I see exactly what you mean, Kiam says. The moment the words leave his mouth, a bell sounds from the foot of the hill. Several long, slow rings. "That's it!" exclaims the young man. "My child has been born!" He dips his head and says again, as if savoring the sounds of his own words, "My child!" When the bell is rung like otherwise for births and deaths, the young man says the sound and ease cause it subtly differing. When a young villager learns to tell the two apart, he or she is considered to be an adult. "I hope this one lives a long time," the young man says, choking with a food of emotion that shows on his face, but then he goes on as if to negate his own hopes for the future. "Either way, whether it lives a long time or not, my child has now been born onto this world. That's all that matters. I'm so happy, so happy." Eyes full of tears, he turns a beautiful smile on Kiam, and then, still smiling, he collapses where he stands. Kiam lays the young man's corpse on the sled and returns to the village. After the young man said the villagers accept his death with the same smiles they had for the birth of his baby, death is not a time for sorrow. It simply marks whether one has been called to heaven earlier or later. The young man's wife takes an ice candy from her leather pouch he has left behind it and places it gently into the baby's mouth. "I want you to grow up to be strong and healthy," he says. "Daddy is saving a wonderful place for you up in heaven, but goes there slowly, and until you go to heaven, I want you to grow up here in the village till you're nice and big." Her words have the gentle tone of a lullaby. Kiam says nothing. If he is to stand unvigilantly for what is right, his silence may be a crime, but burdened with eternal life, Kiam knows how to suspect the right can Kiam knows how suspect the right can be. Throughout history, people have fought the wounded and killed each other in the name of whatever they declare to be right. By comparison, the look of the dead young man's face is tranquility itself. The village closest to heaven is filled with happiness indeed. The baby starts to cry. Its loud wailing like a celebration of the beginning of its own life. However short that life is likely to be, Kiam leaves the village with a smile on his face. The village bell begins to peal, whatever the hell the word is, with utter clarity through the distant mountains, as if to bestow a blessing on the woman who lived life to the fullest with neither resentment nor regret. And with this too long life of mine draws to a close, Kiam thinks, I'd like to be sent off with a sound of bells like this if possible, because he knows that day will never come. Kiam walks on, never stopping, never looking back. His long journey is far from over. The end.